Used.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Here.
Councilmember Marshall.
Present.
If you please stand and join me with the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. But I'm going to see if we can add something to the staff reports about noise in the community and short-term rentals. So I'd like to just hear from the city manager during staff reports about that. So other than that, if there are no objections to the agenda as modified, the agenda will stand approved. Next item on the agenda is a proclamation. Whereas, the February 2019 snow event wreaked havoc on roads around the region, making it difficult for drivers to get around. And whereas the work to clear streets is vital to allow medical, fire, and police officials to respond to emergencies, community members to travel safely, businesses to be open and accessible to customers, and utility services to have access to facilities during weather events. And whereas this was a unique winter storm that hit the region quickly with multiple and cumulative snow events. However, city staff, Northshore Utility District staff responded in helping to keep the roads open and clear. And whereas the city of Kenmore has a new public works operation team with staff that has been on board for merely a few weeks. And whereas in November 2019, the city of Kenmore entered into an interlocal agreement with the North Shore Utility District to provide supplemental snow plowing to aid the city in plowing roads for drivers. And whereas North Shore Utility District staff, while new to providing snow plowing services, stepped up to provide support to the city. And whereas the city of Kenmore values the partnerships with North Shore Utility District, North Shore Emergency Management Coalition, NEMCO, and the Kenmore Police Department was proven again in this recent weather event. And whereas the city's response to this event was truly a coordinated effort and would not be possible without these interagency partnerships. Now therefore, I, David Baker, Mayor, City of Kenmore, Washington, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby recognize the exemplary effort that was collectively put forth by the employees and first responders of North Shore Utility District, NEMCO, City of Kenmore, and the Kenmore Police Department in the February 2019 snow event. Everybody that had something to do this, if you guys want to come up here and step forward, we're going to get a picture of this, and we want you all to share in this proclamation. Floating back and forth, and you guys did an awesome job.
There were two or maybe three commissioners there.
Yeah, also, I think we ought to make recognition of some of the commissioners that are here. I know two of them. Trudy, Trudy Rollins, that's it. And Don Ellis is there, and I know there's a third one out here. There he is. I haven't met you yet.
I'm sorry, Mayor, we actually have 4 here.
Four.
We do.
Thank you, guys. Yes.
So it was really our pleasure. We really wanted to thank the city with this partnership, and our board was very much in support of that, and creative ideas with Kenmore working on this agreement. So great partnership. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we're very lucky to have the relationship with you guys that we have. I think some of you know that I'm an Uber driver, and I was out for those 3 days picking up rides. And I was in different parts of the city and could see how well certain areas were plowed. And I think it was a lot of misleading information floating around out there because Kirkland streets, our streets were much better. They really were. I can recall one time going out at 4 in the morning and Simon's Road being closed when they hit the Kirkland border going down the other side while ours was open. So you guys did an awesome job. And like I said, I drove all around the region, and I was very happy with Kenmore Road. So thank you all for your effort. And also, yes, I think we will hold these. No, we won't hold these. I've got a couple of certificates of recognition here for Haakon, Lande, and Kyle Kellet. You guys, I guess, drove on the evening of February 14th, 2019 while plowing snow on city streets. You noticed Republic Services truck had crashed. You stopped to check and found the driver was trapped. You and your co-worker immediately contacted emergency services, and due to your quick action, Northshore Fire Department was able to free the driver, and you are commended for your decisive response and life-sustaining actions. In Haakon, this one I'd like to present to you. Yeah, I guess I should ask, as steep and crooked as that road is, what were you guys doing up there? Well, I'm sure glad you were up there. All right, next item on the agenda is the introduction of new maintenance workers. Ms. Gordon, Public Works Operations Manager.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I am thrilled to be able to introduce the newest members of the Kenmore family. Curtis Clifton, please stand. Curtis comes from the city of Mercer Island with over 15 years of experience. He's our streets and surface water maintenance supervisor, so we're very happy to have him. He started in November of 2018. Reggie Batista. Reggie's our first maintenance worker hired, and he came on the end of December of 2018. Reggie comes from the city of Bellevue, bringing with him some municipal experience. Paul Halalilo. Paul started the second week of January, I think, this year, and Paul comes from the private sector, and we're happy to have him. And last but not least, Chase Walker. Chase started just a few weeks ago, got thrown into the fire right away, and he also comes from private industry, and we are very happy to have him. We are still have one open position left, but after that final hire will be fully staffed. So, thank you.
Welcome, guys. You'll find we have a great group of employees here in the city of Kenmore. We're very proud of all of them, and we certainly welcome you to the family, so thank you. All right. Next item then on the agenda is Court Olson, co-chair of the People for Climate Action Coalition. And Court, you've got a presentation for us.
Is that on now?
There you go.
Okay, thank you. So I am here to see what Kenmore can do about climate action. A little bit of background. I always wonder who the person is that's giving a presentation, so just a little bit of background. I did get environmentally conscious when I was in high school many years ago, and took speech and debate, so that's how I came to be able to get President Blue hit everyone in our industry, and the U.S. Green Building Council was formed. So I started going to conferences, and one of them I went to in 2002 had a slideshow about what people in a United States poll that's been going on for many years now, who are concerned about climate change and worried about what we're going to do about it. That's up from what's been a trend of around 60%, pretty dramatic increase last year in 2018. So I think that's important. Another thing I want to remind you of is 70%. According to this book and many other books and resources, that's the amount of greenhouse gases that are attributable to our cities. So cities have a big impact on climate change. But what can cities do is a big question, and it's the fourth quarter, we're behind, and it's time for a serious huddle. Well, you all know and have heard, I'm sure, about the K4C, or King County Cities Climate Collaboration. And I understand you've pledged the funds to go ahead and become members this year, so congratulations. We are glad that you folks are in the queue. The K4C, when it started up back in 2014, pledged to these pretty significant and necessary greenhouse gas emissions reductions in years ahead. 2020 is supposed to be 25% reduction from 2007, 50% reduction by 2030, and in 2050 an 80% reduction. Those are the goals. Unfortunately, none of the cities in the county or the county itself has really scratched the surface very hard to get even to the first 2020 goal. So we're going to miss that 2020 goal, but we do think, those of us that are following this closely anyway and advocating strongly, think that we can still get to the 2030 goal of a pretty dramatic 50% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions and on to that 2050 goal, but that's going to take quite a bit of effort. We've made some progress. We've done the first three things on this list, and we measured greenhouse gas emissions in most of our cities and in the county, but now it's time to plan how those greenhouse gas emission goals are really going to be met, and then implement a plan, and then regularly review and adjust it. Cities really need to focus on two main culprits of our greenhouse gas emissions. That's the transportation sector and the building sector. That's how I got interested, because I know that buildings play a pretty big role, but transportation does too. Don't have time to get into the details right now, but just last September, the Rocky Mountain Institute, pretty well-known nonprofit research group, issued a carbon-free city handbook that you can go online and find, and has a lot of good information on what cities can do. But I wanted to call your attention to this particular chart, which emphasizes that there are, as you see here in the yellow, almost half of our greenhouse gas emissions that cities can have impact on relate to our buildings. Another substantial amount is transportation. Varies a little bit from city to city, but this is a national phenomenon. Here in Bellevue, whose data has been posted and available for the last couple of years, when you look at what they're saying greenhouse gas emissions are accountable to, buildings are about 44%, these two wedges, and then transportation or cars and trucks about 42%. So between those two sectors, the bulk of our greenhouse gas emissions are accounted for. A few cities around the country have some notable, I'll call them, climate action plans. By 2016, some were showing some really good success. Portland, Oregon was one of those, and Fort Collins, Colorado, another. Not too many cities can boast those kinds of accomplishments, though. 20% and 17%. Actually, Portland's is a little higher, and I imagine Fort Collins is as well. But the interesting statistic data from Portland, who's been tracking this for quite a while, it's Portland, Multnomah County. They united effort in Portland and the county. Chart shows since they started tracking this back in the early 1990s, their emissions were going up as their population went up and their jobs went up. And then they got pretty ambitious around the turn of the century and started bringing their emissions down in Portland to the point now where they are 21% below the zero middle line there. Zero is 1990 when they started keeping the records. Interesting to note how they came down in the last 2 decades. They came down while their number of jobs was increasing and while their population was increasing. So we can really do these things, they've demonstrated at least, if we put our minds to it, and still have a good economic health. In 2015, Portland, Multnomah developed a really robust climate action plan. It's all printed out here, both sides of the page, and when you go online, you can find it as well. And it outlines 171 different climate actions that the county and city together are taking to fight climate change. That's your third number. The test will be showing 171. That's a lot of actions. I bring it up because we often in our city experiences as our comrades of climate action are talking to council members, find that the question comes up, well, what in the world can cities do? Well, 171 things according to Portland. And they list these things in pretty good detail. There are just a couple of examples. In the interest of time, I won't go into them. I will mention that I'm the co-chair of a group called People for Climate Action Coalition, which is a coalition of active groups of citizens in different cities. You have a pretty active group here in Kenmore, as do 8 other cities so far, and we're in the process of organizing about another dozen cities in our county. So hopefully we're going to have a pretty strong following across the county here by the end of this spring. And considering we just started last May, we're making pretty good progress. There's a lot of enthusiasm and interest. We all have to put our heads together and come up with a plan to make these climate actions together And it's not really something that each individual city has the resources to do, but if we put our heads together in the K4C, we could probably do it. In the handout, you probably have, I drafted an idea of what a toolkit might be. And since I just went down to Portland with a few other people for climate action folks last Friday, and we spent 2.5 hours talking to their program manager, we think that plan is so good that we could bring it up here and save a lot of money and time using their plan as a springboard to get ourselves in King County launched pretty rapidly, because we don't have much time. According to that IPCC report of the United Nations back in October, we only have about 12 years to get our greenhouse gas emissions down substantially if we're going to avoid climate catastrophe. And that means by 2030, we do need to hit that 2030 goal of the K4C. So we need a pretty fast liftoff. So question is, will Kenmore join in the K4C Climate Actions Planning Huddle to take us there? It's all up to you, of course, but we hope you will. So there are the numbers. There's the test, 72%, 70%, 171. Hope you remember those numbers. I think they're all pretty important. And I did my 20-minute presentation in 12.5 minutes, so maybe there is time for a couple of questions if you have any.
I know Kenmore for the last few years has been pretty responsive to trying to implement things that will affect climate change. For instance, when we designed and built the City Hall, we put solar on top, we put a green roof on top, we put porous pavement in the driveways, and we tried to make this as green as possible. We are rated LEED Gold, and we were only a few points away from LEED Platinum. So
Good for you.
City-wise, we have really been conscious of this and continuing to work to do what we can do, but we're certainly more than willing to adopt and work on new targets too, because I think we're all in agreement with you that we're running out of time here.
Sure agree with you, Mayor. Thank you very much. Appreciate your cooperation, and I'm sure our People for Climate Action folks be glad to work with all of you as we tackle this big hurdle. Have a good evening.
Any other questions, comments? Councilmember Srebnick.
Oh, just a little one. I really appreciate your presentation, and particularly that you're not going to start from scratch, and that, you know, when you've got a good model, recognize it and build on that. I think that's a terrific idea, and, you know, Portland's out ahead of us, which is great. We have them to follow. So 2 questions. One, I actually heard a report, an NVR report on Friday about this exact topic. I'm trying to remember whether it was Seattle specific or about King County, but it was one or both. And they were saying that a large percentage, and I think it was the largest percentage in their report of emissions, were due to Port of Seattle. In other words, air travel, Port of Seattle. And I was curious if you're recalling off the top of your head, because I know Portland has an airport as well. You know, what strategies were specific to air travel?
To be specific on Portland, I can't be, because I haven't looked through all 171 actions carefully. But I will say I've thought about, and I know the Port of Seattle's thought a lot about this already. We're doing some fuel switching already with biofuels. And the electric airplane is not too far distant in the future, at least for short hauls, we are hearing. So I think there's some hope there. Air transport itself, if I remember correctly, is in the single digits in terms of percentage of our greenhouse gas emissions nationally. So it's less than 10%. If we leave that as the last hurdle to solve in our quest by 2030, I think we'll probably have, or by 2050 rather, I think we'll probably have solutions by then.
Right.
But I don't know specifically what all those are going to be, but I personally am trying to take the train as much as I can between here and Portland,
Yeah.
so that at least I'm not doing those short hops.
Great. I have just one other question. Yeah, and I mean, they were kind of emphasizing that strategies differ between urban and rural, and of course, there's different things that come up, which makes a lot of sense. So what do you mean when you're talking about being in the planning huddle for K4C, as opposed to just joining the community and conversation? What is that piece?
All right, I could give you a long answer, but in the interest of time, I'll just give you a short one. Our groups in all of our cities, our 9 cities so far, are talking to the county and to our different cities, and we are, as we speak, organizing an event to get elected people together, along with our People for Climate Action citizens, and a conference and an event that's probably going to be in early April, yet to be pinned down, but probably early to mid-April. And we're going to be bringing folks up from Portland to present on what they're doing. And it's that time that we hope we will have created a catalyst for K4C people to really roll up their sleeves and get into a workshop format that's going to help them develop a climate action plan across the county that all cities can subscribe to. And we expect that once they see it and understand it, this Portland plan is probably going to be close to what we will come up with. But that's a work in progress this year, and we're looking to all city councils like yourselves to help support that initiative, to put all our heads together and collaborate much more extensively than has been thus far done in K4C.
Anyone else?
Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Court. We really appreciate your presentation. Thank you. All right. Next item on the agenda is citizen comments. This is an opportunity to express your views on issues that are important to you and to the community. We ask you please limit your comments to 3 minutes in deference to those who work hard to keep theirs within 3 minutes. Will the clerk please call the first person?
Russ Johnson.
Good evening. I'm Russ Johnson. I'm a longtime resident of Kenmore and business owner here. I've come here for 2 reasons this evening. First, I just want to put into the record my personal thanks for the tremendous work by the City Council and the Nancy Osley and Robert Carlinzi and others for their work with Puget Sound Energy and improving our electrical grid. 3 years ago, I live on the infamous Circuit 26, and we were suffering from terrible power outages, some of them extended. And I've gone through this whole last 8 months or so without any outages at all. This is a major change, and I understand that Puget Sound Energy has spent millions of dollars in updating our electrical grid and equipment throughout the city. I personally consider this a tremendous accomplishment for the city and something that all of you should take great pride in, and I just want to say thank you to you all. So that's my first comment. Secondly, I'm here because I'm concerned about the many changes which have been taking place over the past few years with the federal environmental policy. And I didn't know these good green guys were here today and certainly didn't collaborate with them. But I'm concerned about the changes that have taken place which have removed many of the protections for our country's water and air quality. Today I specifically want to focus our attention to the announcement by the EPA to weaken by rolling back certain protections to the wetlands and ephemeral streams which are protected under the Clearwater Rule. On March 26, 2015, the EPA blog issued a statement entitled, quote, "5 ways streams and wetlands keep us and our environment healthy." And I want to just list these 5 ways for you for your, bring them back to your memory. Wetlands are very active in providing filter pollution protection by trapping nitrogen and phosphorus, which contribute to the growth of aquatic plants and algae. And we've seen some tremendous algae blooms all over the country, not just here, but we saw some off of Florida that we'd really never seen before. Wetlands trap floodwaters, and so they, by absorbing a tremendous amount of rainfall and snowmelt, they mitigate the risks of flooding to homeowners and businesses. They act as a buffer to protect developed areas.
Mr. Johnson, you're at 3 minutes. I know you're mid-thought, but wrap it up.
3 minutes?
We're at 3 minutes.
Can I finish this list?
Just, yeah, go ahead, but
Okay. They recharge the groundwater. They provide drinking water. 60% of the streams in the U.S. Are ephemeral streams. They provide habitat for fish and wildlife. The EPA is receiving comments from interested parties right now regarding the change of this rule. I've already submitted a letter in opposition personally to that. I'm asking the City Council to consider also to responding to the EPA in opposition to their plan to degrade these protections as an interested party. And I know that there will be a presentation here later today by Mr. Sawyer. And Mr. Sawyer, I did read your memorandum. Thank you for that. But we as citizens of the United States, even though we may have protections here in the state of Washington that are not available to citizens in other states, we have family members in other states, we travel to other places. I think that we are concerned as residents of Kenmore about our whole country, and I hope that we can express that in some formal way if the council would consider that. Thank you very much.
thank you, Mr. Johnson.
John Hendrickson.
Good evening, John Hendrickson, Kenmore, Washington. I want to follow up on my comments from the last time I was here about considering using eminent domain down at Lake Point. And first thing I wanted to do is I need to apologize on the record to Gary Sargent and to the city. I think I said that I thought he wasn't rational in his valuation of that property. I don't know all the numbers, and it's my opinion that it doesn't seem rational to me based on some figures that I have, but I don't know all the details. Brent Smith mentioned at the retreat that, he knows the income stream, and he talked about that. And I kind of want to talk about that here, about how at the retreat on Saturday, January 12th, Brent made 3 main points. He said he wants to build a relationship of trust and a partnership with Gary Sargent at Lake Point. And the 3 points he made, to me, points towards coercion, not towards building trust. He said, the first thing he said was, he has to have skin in the game. It has to be financial or something. He has to have some kind of really financial liability in the partnership with the city. Can't just be left alone. And he said, we've seen that he hasn't been always honest with us in what he's been doing in operating down there at Lake Point. So if he hasn't been honest, maybe you guys don't have to be honest with him, I guess is the point. And finally, he said that he wanted to terminate the non-conforming use, has to be part of the plan. His income stream, we can't compete with. So if we can take away his income stream, then we can compete and acquire the property. And he also said he didn't think it was legal. So let me just play these for you. My power went off. So here's the first one, skin in the game.
Yeah, so I don't know what that skin in the game is, but I think it has to be financial, it has to be something.
So it has to be financial skin in the game. Then he says about them not being honest.
And we've seen it even on the heavy industrial use and the non-conforming uses on the site that go on. They're not always upfront and honest with it.
And then he went on to say terminating the non-conforming use. That way we can cut into his income stream. And we don't think it's legal, which he should clarify.
And then another component I do think is the expiration or termination of the non-conforming use. It has to be somehow a part of this because if the backup plan, you know, like we like to have a backup plan on everything we do. Well, his backup plan is always, I'm just going to lease it out, continue this use that I've been doing. Well, then that, you know, that's a income stream we can't compete with, and we don't even think it's legal.
So let me play the last part again. It's an income stream we can't compete with. We don't even think it's legal. Deborah, don't look at the time.
That, you know, that's a income stream we can't compete with, and we don't even think it's legal. Yeah.
That's not the way to build a partnership.
We're at 3 minutes, Mr. Hendrickson.
Do you mind if I finish my point about the eminent domain?
If you can do it here fairly quickly, John, yes.
Okay. You got to separate this out. If you want to have a partnership, you got to respect the guy and be voluntary, okay? If he doesn't have to be in a partnership with you, and you can't take away his income stream, it's, you know, unconstitutional, just like you did up at the ball field at St. Anne's, threatening to withhold the permits. You don't seem to understand that, okay? But what you do need to do, you have to think of it as a duty and have the courage to, if he's not going to sell at a reasonable price, to take that property. You have an obligation to do that. You undo the rhetoric from Brent Smith. He would want to sue you. We have to undo that. Distance yourself completely, reject and disassociate yourself with any of those ideas, okay? Get an accurate and objective data on the fair market value, and review the Lake Point feasibility study. We hired someone. You guys had a purchase and sale agreement. And you had someone review that. And he never said that price, even though they needed $126 million, for us to fund that gap would be $16,500 for the average homeowner, okay? And your consultant never told you that purchase price of that land is probably way out of whack. Get 3 people in there to refute that, get him to refute, just get it right. Just be objective. Maybe it's right, but just get it right. Be objective about it.
Can I get you to wrap up, please?
Yep,
Mr. Hendrickson?
and the last thing is, if you don't want to do eminent domain, and you can't get into a partnership with him, what I always thought, you have to wait for him, if his price is so unreasonable, which I tend to think it is, I don't have all the data, you have to wait for him to pass away, and then the next people probably sell it to you.
Thank you, Mr. Hendrickson.
Mayor, there's nobody else signed up.
Anybody else wishing to comment? Anybody else wishing to be heard? Thank you all for your comments. Mr. Johnson, we appreciate your remarks on PSE, and we certainly do want to consider your remarks on environmental issues. And thank you, Mr. Hendrickson, for your comments. All right, next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
And I'll second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Consent agenda stands approved unanimously. Next item on the agenda is ordinance number 190478, amending Kenmore Municipal Code 20.47.030 relating to school impact fees. Mr. Hampson.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. Good evening, council members. As you mentioned, this ordinance is number 19-478, amending the school district's impact fees. So for some history, on May 14, 2018, Kenmore City Council passed ordinance number 18-0463, adopting school impact fees for Northshore School District. This ordinance considered townhomes as single-family residential developments for the purpose of school impact fees only. The City Council now wishes to consider townhouses as multifamily residential units for the purposes of just school impact fees alone, with the school district's 2018 through 2024 capital facility plan, which was adopted in June 25th, 2018, in order to be more in alignment with that plan. The Northshore School District's 2018 through 2024 capital facilities plan includes impact fees only for single-family and multifamilies with 2 or more bedrooms. It doesn't address townhomes or townhouses, and so we want to be in alignment with their plan. The impact fee category and amounts that are on the fee schedule, we're planning on updating those with our mid-year update, and we don't think there's a reason to include that change in here because it's all identified in this ordinance. So currently, the city collects for the Northshore School District $10,573 for single-family residential and $0 for multifamily.
Questions? These townhouses, they are more or less individual units?
More or less individual single-family dwelling
Yes.
units. If you want to compare them to the size and the product themselves, I'd say yes, they're pretty similar, if not more or less
And the
single-family.
units are usually sold as,
Typically, what we
ownership.
see is a fee simple process that's done after the fact, and they get sold off individually.
so in reality, just because there's 2 people living, or 2 families living in a townhome, we don't want to consider them single-family, we want to consider them multifamily, correct?
That's correct. For the purposes of zoning issues, we want to consider anything that has more than 1 unit attached to it as a multifamily.
Seems it puts an unfair burden on our single-family homes, but anyway. Any further discussion?
I have one question on that.
Sure.
And to the best of our knowledge, NSD is going to include a townhome as solely as a multifamily property, is that correct? And they have no intention of instituting or recommending an impact fee that is equivalent to the single-family residence?
So North Shore School District has changed if they haven't, they're getting close to changing their process for multifamily, which would include a impact fee, school impact fee in the range of about $1,800 per townhome. Whereas I said our current rate that we accept for single family is $10,573. But as I understand it, North Shore School District is interested in raising that fee too. And so that will be coming to you later this year through Debbie Benton Community Development.
Yeah, I guess I'm still concerned because
Yeah,
I'm seeing the development of all these all these townhomes, and it looks like we're just passing off the burden to our single-family homes, and I don't necessarily think that's fair.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is, because if you look at it, that's like not even 20% for what could be an equivalent size home. One just happens to be a townhouse and the other is a detached SFR, and for that you're going to charge them only 20% of what you charge a typical. I'm not advocating we need to go increase it. I just find it to be highly odd from the school district's perspective, and then knowing that they want to even increase the detached SFR impact fee. I just think it even makes it more structurally just kind of an unsound policy. But I think it makes no sense for us to push for a higher impact fee if the school district themselves do not even want it, because they're not asking for it for townhomes. So that makes no sense for us to push it. They're the ones that get the money, and if they're not even formally requesting that within their own policy.
So what I could see happening is the townhomes that we're typically seeing constructed in the last 8 to 10 years are fairly a newer product in our area. And so there isn't a lot of data collected from the school district on what kind of impacts they have to the schools. And I think as we see these products continue to be built and it's people to really understand what they look like and how they feel, I think you'll start to see a better comparison between a townhome with 3 or 4 bedrooms compared to a single family. But, you know, right now, I think when they're looking at their capital facility plan, and in my opinion, if they're comparing it to a multifamily apartment, which is a totally different product or animal than a townhome. But, you know, I think as time goes on and we get more information, or they get more information, they may reassess their policy.
I just look at the desire of the American public to finally own a home, and I look at all the roadblocks we're putting in the way with all these fees and whatever, and I think it should be spread out. And I think it should be spread out over the townhomes. I'm looking at the townhomes, 11 of them going up going up on 170th there. I mean, I know they're paying impact fees, but 2 houses were taken down and 11 went up. So, and I know that's a zoning issue, but they are going to be sold, and they're not going to have to participate in school impact fees like a single-family residence would have to. And I just don't think it's fair, so my 2 cents. Councilmember Shrevenick.
I guess I just have maybe a question. So the about process, I guess. So the district comes to us, council, and asks us to agree to impose these fees that are then passed to the district. So we can do that. We could, in theory, choose to level the playing field more. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
The school district is going to come to you with a proposal, and you could do what you wish with it. You could increase it or you can decrease it according to their capital facility plan, but
Right,
may I-
okay.
actually, I may have to get some clarification. I said
Yeah.
increase. I don't think you can actually increase it above it, but you can
Not
decrease
above what
it.
their
Yeah,
evidence shows, correct. But you can have a fee that's less.
right.
Councilmember Smith?
Just one other point. I think we're a little bit unique, too, in the Northshore School District in the fact that because we are more built up, we're probably going to see a much higher percentage of our new development will be townhomes and multifamily relative to a Bothell and a Woodinville. So it really is, it is a different, I do think there is some real differences within the district, too.
Your Honor, if I could add one thing. So on March 4th, you're going to have a joint board meeting with the school board here at Kenmore City Hall. And just today, I asked the city clerk to add this item on for your discussion, more at a higher level rather than getting into the details, because we know that the school district will come back later. But I thought it would be good for you guys to talk to each other eye to eye about it at a kind of a higher policy level.
My understanding is on this night, you're looking for a yes, no vote from us on this.
That's correct.
Any further discussion, any further questions? So the chair will entertain a motion to adopt ordinance number 19-0478, amending the Kenmore Municipal Code relating to impact fees.
So moved.
A motion.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All right.
Your Honor, I
Yes.
just remembered two typos in the ordinance that'll have to get corrected. This was originally scheduled to come before you on February 11th, and because of the snow date, it got canceled. And so the ordinance in 2 places references February 11th.
So then, what we're voting on then is the ordinance with the typos fixed. If there are no further questions or discussion, the clerk please take the roll.
Councilmember Danuski?
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall?
Yes.
Councilmember Shrevenick?
Yes?
Mayor Baker?
No.
Deputy Mayor Herbig?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
5-1.
All right. Next item on the agenda. EPA and Army proposed waters of the U.S. definition revision. Mr. Sawyer.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. So I have prepared a report in response to Council's inquiry a couple months back about what impacts may be coming from the EPA and Army proposed revisions to waters of the United States. And I prepared a short memo here that I can quickly summarize and then take any questions. But the Army with the EPA are proposing to narrow the definition of waters of the United States to be only those permanently connected to navigable waters. And so for instance, in our jurisdiction here, if this were implemented, they would be talking about Lake Washington and Sammamish River, basically would be the two water bodies, and anything permanently connected to that would be considered water of the United States. However, as I kind of mentioned in the second paragraph of the memo, in Washington State, EPA has delegated the authority to administer the requirements of the Clean Water Act to the Washington State Department of Ecology. And Washington State has its own definition of waters of the state. And when any sort of environmental review for a project occurs in Kenmore, whether we're reviewing shoreline regulations, critical area regulations, going through SEPA review, if we're getting an HPA with the Washington State Department of Fish and Wildlife, all of those permits and agencies refer to the definition of the Washington State waters of the state. So the impacts here, I think, would be relatively minimal. In the last paragraph, I identify where we could have projects that have dual oversight, where we're having to go through, a project may be having to go through our local review, and then they may also be going through an Army Corps permit for wetlands in the project. And if there are projects that then fall outside of this new revised definition, they would only be going through the review process with our local regulators. So that might not necessarily be a bad thing. It could probably make getting through the permitting process easier for that. But I point out it would still be maintaining the current level of environmental oversight that we already have. But as the gentleman pointed out during the citizen comment, and I didn't catch his name, but I was going to actually make that point as well that he kind of already made. That's just in Washington State, and there are some states where EPA is the direct regulatory authority. So in those states, it would be whatever the new revised definition is that's what they would go by. And then even states that maybe EPA has delegated authority to administer the Clean Water Act in those states, they could be all over the place. I don't know every state's rules, but it would only be as strict as what that state has decided. So there could be more potential impact in other areas of the United States.
Councilmember Marshall.
And you had mentioned redundancies with the federal enforcement, but what are some different aspects of federal enforcement, if there are any, besides just another layer of protection? I know one has definitely got to be strategic value for military value. I think that's where the original waterways protection of the navigational servitudes came from, trade and military strategic value. But what are other values that aren't redundant with the state?
I'm not sure I entirely understand the question, but I don't, other than the projects that we see and come in, the only redundancy is really when it comes to wetland review. So most of the other things are delegated to either us or other state agencies, except for wetlands, which still falls under the Army Corps. So I don't know if that answers your question. And then they also see, we work with them on dredging, but that obviously wouldn't change because we only dredge in navigable water, so that activity would remain the same.
Maybe what else does the Army Corps do that state ecology does not? What are the opposite of the redundancies you had mentioned?
If there are others, I don't know off the top of my head, but those two are the ones that we have dealt with here that I know of. Others may exist, and I can look into that further if you wish.
Any other questions?
I guess my question is, Mr. Johnson recommended that the city weigh in on this issue with the EPA proposed rule change. Do you wish the city to weigh in?
Councilmember Shrubnik?
I definitely do. I wasn't sure if this was the right time to bring it up or in our own comments, but I appreciated Wes Johnson's comment about that. And just as we weighed in on the census, even though we would probably have our own strategies to mitigate the effects of whatever decision happens there, this feels similar, that there's no harm in weighing in on this and expressing our opinion.
Yeah, I agree with Councilmember Shrubnik. There's certainly no harm in weighing in, and it's better than sitting silent, so. Councilmember Marshall?
I agree with weighing in as well and keeping the federal protection what it was, not shrinking it for sure. I'll tell you, I'll be honest, I mean, it seems as though there's vigorous state enforcement here in Washington, for sure, and perhaps if the federal standard were weakened, we wouldn't see an immediate effect, but we can't know every impact of changing of a regulation. So I'm sure there's some scenario that, I'm definitely not able to anticipate right now that could come up. So I favor keeping it federally protected with the current standard.
Everybody in agreement with weighing in? Seeing lots of nods here, so yeah.
Okay, we'll write up a comment to submit to EPA then.
Right.
And it was mentioned in the
Opposing the
memo, but the government shutdown did delay that comment period. So as of the 31st, they still had not rescheduled when that 60-day period was going to be. So we haven't missed any opportunity.
But that's good that if we do weigh in, and you run it by us, right?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, next item is Gordon. We get to see you twice tonight. Snow event recap. Mr. Carlinzy is on this one too.
Yeah, I'll turn it over to Jennifer. She did a great job leading the effort over the last few weeks. I heard that this was the snowiest month in 50 years, so going back to 1969. And I was talking to my mom over the phone about it yesterday, and 1969, the winter of 1969 happened to be the winter I was born. And so my mom and I were, my mom thinks that she was in labor with me, driving me through that blizzard in mid-January 1969. So,
with a team of horses pulling the wagon.
With a snowplow in front.
yeah, my mom always talked to me about how she drove through a blizzard to get me to go to the hospital to deliver me, but I didn't know it was the snowiest in 50 years. So anyway, so I'm just really pleased with how we had a brand new, very brand new Public Works Department, in-house Public Works Department. As you all know, we've been contracting with Lake Forest Park for the last 20 years. But this was the first time that we had our own in-house crew since January 1st. And we jokingly said, it's going to snow a lot on our first year. And Jennifer said, don't say that. And I guess I probably shouldn't have said it because it happened. But it was great because this brand new crew was able to show what they were made of. And the partnership with Northshore Utility District was crucial. I mean, I don't think we could have done it without them. But with that, I'll turn it over to Jennifer, and you can go over some more details and statistics on what we delivered.
Sure. I know you all just got this memo tonight, so I don't know if you want me to I didn't want to go over it redundantly, but I just kind of recap of the event and, the number of hours that we put into plowing and treating the roads, and how much equipment we have, how much supplies we went through, the resources from Northshore Utility District, and just as far as, it wasn't just Public Works that responded to this event. I want to definitely mention the entire city staff really came together and helped us through this event. I mean, we had the reception team taking phone calls in. We received, let's see, 189 requests, still counting because they're still coming in. And I'm just really thrilled with our new staff, thrilled with the partnership with Northshore Utility District, and I couldn't be more pleased with, how our first snowstorm, how we were able to respond to that. I did want to mention that also, even though the snow is gone for the most part, there's still a lot of work to be done. There were a lot of vegetation issues, trees down, taking down comm lines. We had few power lines down, but mostly communication lines, which seemed to take a little bit longer to clear and get back up. But a lot of vegetation cleanup that we'll be doing in the right-of-way and parks, and we did experience some heavy winds along with the weight of the snow resulted in a lot of damaged vegetation. So we'll be kind of continuing on that cleanup effort for the next few weeks, along with the street sweeping, cleaning up all the sand that we put down, hopefully trying to keep that out of the catch basins to not make that work for this summer, worse. So next steps, we're going to be doing a debrief this week and talking to our staff. I know there's lots of things that we can improve on and lessons learned, so open to any input that you have for me.
Do we have any questions? Councilmember Smith.
Well, I don't have a question, which is unusual, but pretty extraordinary how new the department is and how well you function during that time. I think it's really fantastic, and especially on top of everything to have the joint partnership with NUD and that being new as well. And I think it's really a fantastic job. So thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Marshall.
To go into a longtime resident curmudgeonly mode, actually, I can't really summon it because never in my life have I seen so many snowplows in the city of Kenmore. I have not seen it. I saw like multiple plows in like perhaps one drive. Would be here tonight to be able to let us know and all that, and definitely we can learn from people's suggestions, and I trust you guys will totally be up to that. I know you will be. So overall, I think it's, I have to agree. I think it's a really good job.
Thank you.
Yeah. Deputy Mayor.
So about a week after the snow ended, so last weekend I was going out with a friend and we were driving down Lake City Way and we hit one of those gigantic potholes that you get after one of these things and blew out his tire and ruined our night. And I've seen that we had some pictures of people filling in potholes here too. What do we know how much? Do we have an idea, kind of a guesstimate of how much damage we have to our roads because of the?
Not off the top of my head, no. I know of several potholes that I'm aware of right now, but I'm sure there's more to come. It starts breaking that up, the alligator pavement, and you get that freeze and thaw, and it's gonna result in potholes.
Yeah. Is the plan to address that? Are you just doing like a cold mix right now, and then are you going to come back with a hot mix later, or are you just going to?
Right now we're doing cold mix. We'll see how it kind of goes, but we're hoping in the next couple of months to be able to be using hot mix.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
I just want to echo Councilmember Marshall's and Smith's comments. I mean, I've seen plowed in, 20 plus years. So it's, and I saw that, throughout the city that, you got past first tier, you got past second tier, you're working on third tier, and it was very impressive, very impressive. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Or Danuski, whatever. I can't be the only one not to say thank you, so I'm hoping you had fun, that you had fun because you had control for the first time, and hopefully that was a nice experience for you. And yeah, it was great to see. I've never seen a snowplow on my road, so I did for the first time, so thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Danuski. City Manager.
The last two emergencies we've had to deal with involved a close partnership between us and Northshore Utility District, and the bond became even stronger during this event. We do plan on having an after-action debrief with those who participated. We'll be scheduling that soon, and we'll be talking about things done well and lessons learned, things like that. So,
I followed a lot of the posts going on, and I just got to shake my head at amazement of people and what was said. I say good on you. We had a pickup truck with a snowplow blade on it. That's great. We're utilizing everything we have to get that snow out of the way. I think it was fabulous. The reaction that you guys had and the way you handled it was just amazing. I think you did awesome. I'm sorry, I can't help it if people want us to plow their sidewalks for them or their driveways for them, but you guys did an awesome job, and thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks again. Next item, review of State House Bill 1923, an act relating to urban residential building capacity. Spent. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you all too. So in your packet there was a memo giving a staff review of House Bill 1923, which is a bill to address housing capacity and housing affordability. And we've provided these comments to AWC, and we've provided these comments to Brianna, who's been sharing them down at the legislature. So we reviewed the bill in detail. We provided comments and questions, and we also provided a suggestion for what we thought might improve this bill. So the reason we brought this before you is we know that housing affordability is one of your top goals, and we just wanted to make you aware of what's going on in the legislature and what the city's position is. We of course support both housing capacity and housing affordability, but we do have some questions and concerns about how the bill is currently proposed. So I'm happy to take any questions or comments or...
Councilmember Smith.
Well, I kind of felt like I had totally missed something on this because I didn't realize this was as encompassing as it was. And I know that this issue is something that we've talked about considerably over the last couple, 2-3 years. But I actually find this bill to be completely the wrong approach. And I actually considered it to be everything I hate about state government. And so I would like us not to support it. We're doing a lot on our own, and we're doing it in a way that suits our community, suits our geography, our traffic patterns, everything else. And when I see something like this, it drives me nuts because they're trying to make us do something that may not be what's right for our community. And so I just don't like it. And I would say if you want to help us, give us tools that we can maybe finance and work through the policy issues differently rather than trying to ram down options down our throat. So that's my opinion.
Well, you probably said it probably more bluntly than I tried to say it in the memo, but I think the point is well taken that we're trying to encourage more flexibility, providing a range of options to the local jurisdictions to decide how best to meet the capacity and affordability.
Can I offer maybe a perspective from maybe why the legislators are proposing this? And that is, you have cities like Seattle that aren't doing what growth management intended them to do. They're protecting all their single-family neighborhoods that probably in an urban environment like that should be going, you know, with more density in their neighborhoods. You know, cities across the world have done that. Big cities have gone into, you know, to more apartments and higher density type housing, but cities like Seattle just resisted it, and at a local level they can't make it happen. They keep defaulting to their single family neighborhoods, which has an effect on being able to work or live where you work, near where you work, and puts a damper on, you know, how much housing can be built, and causes people to live further out away from the jobs and all that. So I think the state is saying, look, I realize that cities at the local level can't overcome neighborhood opposition, so the state is providing this political cover for cities to have to take on more density. That's the sense I get from the bill. I think one approach, rather than coming out and opposing the bill, would be to offer suggestions to make it more easier for us to implement.
Deputy Mayor and then Councilmember Shrubnik.
So in your memo, you say, where'd it go? Talking about fixed guideway transit station. You say, assuming BRT is included within the definition of fixed guideway transit, how likely do you think that is?
When we were looking through this bill, we thought we'd actually found a citation in the rules that was pretty clear about the inclusion. But when you go back and try and find that path again, we couldn't find that path again. So at this point, we are assuming that bus rapid transit is part of that definition, although it wasn't clearly defined in the bill. But I think if you follow other links to other areas of the code, the LCWs, we can find it. I just couldn't find it again.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
So, I'm a little reluctant to get into Seattle bashing. I actually think, I mean, what they're doing in Seattle is actually eroding a lot of their single-family neighborhoods, and they actually are pushing the envelope with density, and it's actually causing a lot of heartache among city leaders. And of course, in our own comp plan, we actually make the case that we want to support our single-family neighborhoods too. So I think we're a little hard-pressed to make a negative comparison there. But I think this bill is really problematic in all the ways that you said. And I don't know whether it's completely opposing it or whether, trying to salvage it in some way. I think obviously we do agree that we want to increase capacity and increase affordability. But the way this is written is really the definition of preemption of city options and kind of dictating the process by which to get to those outcomes. And I mean, an idea in addition to yours or alongside would be, if they're going to spend money on something like this, maybe a better use would be to spend it on incentives to get to actually the goals that they want. If they have targets for capacity for cities of different sizes, just say what those are and then allow us to get to them and get an incentive. Or same with affordability, allow us the tools to get to them and to get to the goal. Mm-hmm. So I think that's essentially what you're saying. Yes. in your comments. Yes. But yeah, I'd like to see the money better spent.
Councilmember Marshall.
Yeah, just going with Councilmember Shrubnik's and the city manager's ideas, and yours, Ms. Bent. It's definitely something to try and include a city's option or local option, I think, with the bill. Some broad sense of if Councilmember Srebnick says it's guidance from them as to the numbers they want, or if the legislation would be something that all the cities could get behind to allow more of that local option, just in a obviously very crude sense that I'm painting it, very broad sense. And then I had a question for you was, how do you see this complementing, supplementing, contradicting the GMA and its housing requirements? How do they interplay at all? How do they contradict? Do they interplay? And how do they relate?
Well, I guess in its final form, it will have to, there has to be some consistency between the bills. So I can't imagine they would be able to pass something which was in direct conflict with GMA. So I think, GMA in terms of housing is encouraging density, it's encouraging a variety of housing, and also affordability. So I think broadly that's what GMA is saying, and I think, the bill is trying to do that. It's just how it's doing it, which I think we would like to have more incentive base and local flexibility rather than sort of being, having one size fits all.
Thank you.
Councilmember Smith?
Okay, now I'll give you something productive rather than just speaking against it. So I would say anything that can diminish the mandate portion of it and give us, whether it's tools or some guidance in ways that can help us on maybe the regulatory side of dealing with some issues, that might be helpful. Two, I think economics of a city should play a role. If I recall, I don't have it in front of me, I left it on my desk at home, but if I recall, it was a 10,000 population base for the cities. I mean, that seems very unfair to put that level of burden on a small city. And so I would say there's a relationship between population of the city and also the economics that go with it, and that has to play a role because the impacts on a 10,000, I'm picturing the city of Sultan for some reason and thinking, I don't know what their population is, but to think they would be lumped in potentially to the same level of mandate that you're going to put on the larger cities, that makes no sense whatsoever. And then lastly, and this gets to the transportation guideways, there is a big difference between light rail and bus rapid transit. And light rail, when it's up and running, will be a fixed installation that it's easy to predict how growth can develop around it. Whereas anything that is related to the bus transit part, that becomes a variable option that to dictate something for growth when we don't have the assurance of what's going to happen in the future. And they've already changed the plan on in some ways of what they want to do here. And so I would say it puts a much bigger burden on a city that doesn't have a fixed transportation network. So those are hopefully some productive things.
Deputy Mayor.
I'll be the contrarian here and say that I don't think that this is completely terrible. And I think 1923 is mainly, I could be wrong, but I think it's mainly kind of a conversation starter with a lot of folks. I think, and we even recognize this in Kenmore, that we need, that we are at least trying to, through at least our TOD, trying to encourage growth around transit centers. We recognize that it's good urban policy, it's good transportation policy, it's good housing policy. And I think that this is a way to start a conversation about how to make sure that's happening in other places. I think, I agree with Councilmember Smith, though. I think that this makes a lot more sense when you're talking about fixed rail installations rather than tire installations. I just, those aren't quite as set in stone, although we have torn up streetcars in the past in this neck of the woods. But I think long term, I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't want us to be going down to Olympia and having our lobbyists spending a bunch of time railing against this personally. I would like to see us trying to engage in the conversation in a productive way to find ways to encourage viable, usable TOD along, especially, like light rail installations more than anything else, because that is where the capacity truly is. I mean, buses are great. The BRT here is going to increase our transit access in the city, our frequency and all of that by quite a bit, but it doesn't compare when you're talking about 4-car light rail trains coming through every 10 minutes. That's a completely different animal that we'll never be able to compete with BRT out here. So I think I would encourage us not to take a hard stance against this, but instead make sure that our folks are in the conversation, because we ourselves have expressed interest in making sure that TOD is something viable and something that we're encouraging. It's something we're trying to make work, even if we haven't had any applications on it yet. And I'd like to see us continue down that path, more than just, being in conflict with this particular bill. I think it's a conversation starter more than anything.
I guess I have some concerns here with concurrency in transportation, in that we're a pass-through city already, and this could potentially add a lot more cars. And with 522 being exempt from impacts, I'm really concerned with what they're trying to do in a little square mile community to increase the density to such levels that traffic will definitely be impacted.
Okay.
I mean, GMA was supposed to provide for concurrency, but we all know that it failed.
Can I just have a quick response? Sorry.
Go ahead.
I would just argue that currently, though, the way that we're seeing things built out, especially with affordability levels where they are at Kenmore, and they're not adding to the gridlock, where they have options to get around without cars, and where the housing might be, it's not going to be a house, but something a little bit more affordable, a little bit smaller. So anyway.
Councilmember Marshall.
As a brief note, I was also concerned about the couple of options they had for EIS exemptions from a couple of the, I think they were standalone projects or something like that. Like, yeah, you can go without the EIS if you put in this massive project, which I am worried about.
So I guess what I'm hearing is that you want the city to continue to be part of the conversation as this bill moves forward, offering suggestions for reducing mandates and allowing more increased in flexibility and local control.
I don't know if that was maybe implied in there, but on the 10,000, it just seems like such a low level. Did you say that, or did I miss it?
I did not say that specifically. So I
Okay.
think that was trying to summarize sort of the general position, and then you also made some specific questions which we can also put forward, whether it be how this is applied to different community size, how it should differ between fixed rail or bus routes. So I've made a note of those specifics. So I think I was trying to capture the general sentiment along with understanding there are some specific comments you would like us to forward.
And the 10,000 is in your bill, or in your memo. Yeah.
I also heard incentives versus mandates.
Yes,
is that
absolutely.
correct? Okay.
Which is the way we have approached it in the city. And I'm not saying it's working ideally, but we're also pretty new in the process, and it makes a lot more sense to me to, anyway.
Okay.
All right, you
Thank
got
you.
what you need?
Yes, thank you.
Fabulous.
Your Honor, I have one more item for staff report.
Yes.
So have you seen the latest Puget Sound Business Journal? Have you seen who is right here on the cover? That is Nancy Owsley. The title is Kenmore on the Rise. Nancy Owsley leverages the city's prime lakeside location. Go to page 50. So you go to page 50, and you ready for this? A full 2-page spread.
There you go.
You can see that's Nancy Owsley right there.
Great.
So Nancy and her efforts with Gallatin were able to land this article, and it's a way for us to tell Kenmore's story through the eyes and the daily life of Nancy Owsley. So really excited that we got this kind of exposure. The title of the article is Owsley drives Kenmore with relentless incrementalism. So, there we go. So, well done, Nancy. Thank you.
All right. Your staff report, sir?
That's it.
No, you have one more thing to talk about.
Oh, right, the noise, yes. So we have Airbnbs throughout the city, and there's one Airbnb in particular that is appearing to, at least in the eyes of the neighbors, being held at this Airbnb. So allegedly, people are going to are renting it and then having parties, and brings multiple vehicles and all sorts of activity to a single-family residential neighborhood. So Brian Hampson, could you give a brief update on your interactions with the property owner, what's been done so far?
So managers, as Rob said, it's an Airbnb house, and the property owner doesn't live in the United States. I think that he or she lives in China, and have a property manager here in Kenmore locally who runs the Airbnb house online. And so we had a discussion with him through an interpreter. He spoke Chinese, and we interpreted a discussion through with him. But what it boiled down to is we told him about the city's regulations and what he can and can't do in the city, and that the complaint and the stuff that was going on, both it was a nuisance concern because of the noise and other things that are going on, but also a safety concern. I guess there was a time when the police responded that the cars were parked so close together that he probably couldn't have got a fire truck or something like that through it. And so the property representative at that time had agreed to take it off of Airbnb until we could have a further discussion about it. Before we had a further discussion, it got put back up on Airbnb apparently the last week or two. I'm not aware of it until we got the most recent complaint, which I checked again today to see if I could find it, and I couldn't find it on Airbnb. So I'm going to reach out again to the property manager and follow up.
If I could just add one more thing to Brian's report, if we can't get a hold of the property owner soon, we're going to be discussing next steps and possible enforcement steps with the city attorney and trying to figure out what our options are to perhaps step it up a bit if we have to.
That was a question. So what are the ordinances that are being violated?
Well, they're allegedly violated, but
allegedly violated. Some of the parking situations could be in violation of some of our parking ordinances. Noise ordinances, loud ruckus isn't allowed after certain hours in the night. The violation of the actual zoning code itself. What others? That's about it.
Councilmember Marshall.
And as to the zoning code, is it for business, operations of business, or are there only certain zones, not residential, that you're allowed to have Airbnbs, or how does that work for the zoning code?
We're getting into a really gray area. We're talking about Airbnbs and other kind of temporary lodging. So when our code was written, it didn't specifically address animals like Airbnbs, but what it talks about are kind of like motels and hotels that are in residential zones. And so that's what we're kind of using for our determination on the zoning code. And so if we go through this and we figure out that there's more that needs to be done to this, we could bring it up with Rob and you guys and find out if you want to do some additional changes to the code.
Great, thank you.
It's a tough one because you want to respect the character of the single-family neighborhoods, but Airbnb is also actually longer-term rentals that provide an alternate form of housing. So it's that issue we're wrestling with, providing more housing options, but protecting the character of our single-family neighborhoods. And So a lot of cities are wrestling with it. And Nancy Owsley just sent us a link to a New York Times article about it and what's going on in the city of New York. Maybe something that, I think we were hoping that other cities would go before us, and if it looking like it's going to be a problem here in our town. So far, we've only received one complaint, right? This is the only one we've received regarding Airbnbs.
I think that we received a few complaints, but I think it's for the same location, if I remember correctly. I don't think there's multiple complaints else out there. And I was doing some research through a few different websites that you could rent a property on. And I'm seeing a range of, it's hard to tell too, because people put them on daily, and they may put them on for a particular time. You get stuff that ranges anywhere from a bedroom to a house. Primarily, a lot more, what I saw was just bedrooms that were for rent too. And so those are additional income for people that are and also visitors to our area. So we're wrestling with that too. And then in addition to that, I don't know, I'm maybe about 50 or so in the city of Kenmore. And like Rob said, this is one that we've only received a complaint on.
Question.
Councilmember Marshall?
So I have a email from a concerned citizen and a homeowning family as a neighbor. Where should I send that? They want to know more information about just what laws in general apply and then what the city's response might be. Car, or is that or more particularly?
Either way, if you send it a car, it'll get to me. If you send it to me, we can enter it as a car.
Much thanks.
No, that's not the same email we all got, is it? It's a different one?
Yeah, this is from Ms. Howard.
Okay. Thank you. I guess I'll save my next question for you, Mr. City Manager, to comments and initiatives portion. So, Councilmember reports, comments, and initiatives. We do this every meeting, but I don't think we've ever taken the opportunity to explain to the public who is watching us on by the stream, which I know people out there are watching us. So we do this point because Kenmore's voice is being heard on many different committees and boards in the region and nationally. And this is our opportunity to hear about them. And it is also to help those watching to understand Kenmore's efforts to be heard and informed about what we are doing in the region. So with that, let's go to comments and initiatives. Councilmember Smith.
I would like everyone out there to know I have nothing to say.
Councilmember Marshall.
I would definitely like to get the Northshore Parks and Recreation District issues back on our agenda after our snow interim and all that, and the amount that they needed, and maybe have the senior center director come by and give a shout. And also still making progress with our city attorney, Don Rytan, on the hangar First Amendment policies. So we're still looking to have something for that for the council sometime soon.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Nothing in particular to add, although I am looking forward to the another For the Love of Kenmore event that I believe is in the works. Thanks.
Councilmember Danuski.
Nothing to add today.
Deputy Mayor.
3 weeks off in a row. I missed you guys. It's nice to be back. That's all I got.
Mr. City Manager, I understand that you're familiar with a new bill that's come up, dealing, I believe, with MVET and funding that can put some sound transit funding in jeopardy that would impact garages and some of the things on initial review. Anything you can add to that? Anything?
Yeah, I just heard about it this evening, and I put in a call to Shelley Helder, and She was going to look into it and get back to me as soon as possible, but yeah, I think there's potential for a bill out there where the amount of MVET revenue paid to Sound Transit might be impacted as much as $1.4 billion, perhaps. And this particular bill might actually get a hearing in the near future. And if Sound Transit loses $1.4 billion, they'll probably be looking for cuts, and might have to be looking to even our project for cuts. The bill might even provide guidance on what gets cut first, and I think parking garages might be on that list. So, again, I just heard about the bill this afternoon or this evening, and I'll get what I can from our lobbyist in Olympia as soon as possible.
And you'll let us know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm also, Nancy doesn't know this, but I'm going to ask her to check with Sound Transit and find out where Sound Transit's on this and how it might affect Kenmore.
All right. Thank you for that. I had the opportunity to be in an event with Congresswoman Susan Delbene, Senator Maria Cantwell, and Mayor Jenny Durkin. Senator Cantwell was speaking on the Land and Water Conservation Fund. Monies from that fund initially bought St. Edward State Park and was used to purchase the boat ramp in that little sliver of property that we're trying to obtain right now to build the replacement bridge. So we're pleased that Cantwell was able to get this bill introduced in the in the Senate, and Susan Delbene is going to run it by the House, and there's every indication that this bill will pass. It fell out of, it expired in September, and so there's been efforts to get this activated again, and so I'm glad that those two are working hard to do it. So it certainly has benefited Kenmore. Been meeting with the last 3 or 4 months with Alan Dowderman. He's the mayor of Newcastle, and he is one of the higher-ups in Imagine Housing, who's working with St. Vincent de Paul and looking to put affordable housing down to the 30% level there on 73rd and 522. And he's also now talking with Sound Transit about adding housing to the top of the parking garage that ST3 is planning for Kenmore. And we're looking, I think, at a total of somewhere between 200 and 250 units in the mix of those two projects, which would be a tremendous opportunity for a number of housing units at the 30% level. So I'm really excited about that, and I'm very happy with running into Mayor Dodderman in the different events and meetings that I go to. Had a meeting with our legislators this week. I was down in Olympia, and I met with Representative Valdez, and I always say his name wrong, so I was working hard to get that one right. And Senator Frocht and Representative Paulette, talking about our issues that we're trying to get passed with the capital projects and transportation budget. So very favorable responses from them, and they are working very hard to get us the funds that we're asking for. So I think that's all I have. But we are now going to recess into executive session, and
At least 45 minutes. Let's say 45 minutes.
Yeah, please.
Could you tell us, I know I've heard of Imagine Housing. I honestly don't know who backs them or what. Can you give us a little bit?
They're a large provider of affordable housing.
And where
in the
do they get
county.
funding?
They transformed from another name. Were they part of that group that was going to do across the street way back when?
That's fine. I just thought maybe, don't worry about it.
They've been around.
I'll-
They're a
I'll
player
Google
in affordable housing in the region. They've gotten a lot of money from the feds and from various sources, and their housing is pretty good quality and pretty reputable. But I think that they were part of another group. When we first sold the property across the street, and we were looking at developing housing there, there was a housing group that we worked with, and I think they may be an iteration of that group or something. But I know they've been around for quite a while. Okay, so we're going to adjourn to executive session for 45 minutes, pursuant to RCW 42.30.1101 subsection B and RCW 42.30.1101 subsection I. There is property acquisition potential litigation, and there will be no action taken.